Hey, everybody. Welcome to the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today, and I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe. Like and subscribe, and please share the show with someone. Please share the show with someone. Meet me on Twitter or X at Santita J. Become my friend there. Become my friend on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. Come on, everybody, share the show with at least one person. We have Ariel Gold with us again, the executive director of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. She was the co-national director of Code Pink. And we have got Chip Gibbons. You have been talking about this, writing about this, policy director for Defending Rights and Dissent. You all should have been with us just before we came on the air. That's why it took us a minute because there's so many layers to this. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, Ariel. It's like peeling an onion. I mean, that's what this is. It can make you cry even. But there's a lot going on here. I mean, a lot. So talk to us. Chip, what are we seeing? I mean, and I've been inspired by this. I mean, as we look at more than 2,000 demonstrators have been arrested. More than 2,000. I mean, and really, this is almost like 2 weeks old, right? And it shows no sign of letting up. And Bryce is with us right now. As a matter of fact, he's joining us. But I want to know, Bryce, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Bryce Green, I'm on with Ariel Gold of Fellowship of Reconciliation. She is a Jewish Voice for Peace and from really Rainbow. All of that, and Chip Gibbons, of course, Defending Rights and Dissent, their policy director. Chip is in motion, but so are you. Do you mind, Chip, if you
go ahead? I want to hear from Bryce more than I want to talk. I want to hear from Bryce more than I want to talk.
I want to hear from all of you, quite frankly. Bryce, what happened to you?
All right. Well, I'm sure you guys have been seeing all these encampments going up around the country: Columbia, Harvard, Austin, UCLA. Well, Indiana University, where I am a PhD student, put together a divestment coalition that did something similar. Last Thursday, we put up an encampment in one of the fields on campus, traditionally the free speech zone, and basically immediately, we were met with military levels of violence. The local university police department called in state troopers, who then called in, military vehicles. They had a chopper in the sky. They had assault rifles, shotguns, pepper bullets, and they even had a sniper on the roof overlooking all of these, students protesting in the park. And the state troopers said that this was because we put up a tent, and that is against the code. And if we put up a tent, then I guess that warrants military levels of violence. And so on that day, they came in, they swept the tent, arrested several people violently. Some people even went to the emergency room as a result of the injuries they sustained. But after that, we of course continued. We put up more tents. We camped out for 2 more days. And then on the Saturday, they swept again. And this was the sweep where I was picked up. And we know for a fact that they had me in their sights because we have a police scanner chatter where they're describing, a black male with an afro, blue shirt, black shorts. That's me. You can't see my face, but that's me. And they picked me up. An officer ran up to me, told me, don't run. I complied because I don't want to die. And I decided to comply. And then I was hit with a 5-year ban from the university, as well as charges of trespassing. Now, the 5-year ban is interesting because initially I was issued a 1-year ban, but I made a joke. I kind of asked them to change it to a 1-day ban. They didn't find it funny. I thought it was funny, but they didn't find it funny. And when I got the ban notice back, they had scribbled out 2025 and then wrote 2029 instead. So banned for 5 years as a result of a military level incursion into a peaceful demonstration against the ongoing genocide. And that's what we keep wanting to stress. even our media people, they go out and talk about what's going on. We say, well, what's happening to us is nothing compared to what we're fighting against. We can say how much we hate our university, how much the president is awful, and how their policies support evil. But, at least we have a university. In Gaza, with American support, Israel destroyed all the universities. And so we got to keep the focus on that. But what's being done to me is, and other organizers, is an example of the length that the American empire and the states and the universities and all these institutions are willing to go to prevent people from voicing the very real concerns about their country's involvement in genocide. If we were out there protesting, for better food in the cafeteria, and we put up a tent, they certainly would have sent out state troopers and militarized police and armored vehicles, and, had us in the sniper scopes. No, they did this because of political reasons. They did this to safeguard the interests of the state of Israel, to continue the genocide that's ongoing, and to prevent and discourage anyone from challenging those things. So that's what happened to me. I'm fighting it. All the people who were arrested were fighting it. In total, there are around 56 arrests, I believe, 56 arrests. And some people were everyone was issued a 1-year ban, but mine got bumped up to 5, as I said.
What does the ban entail? What does that mean for you academically?
So the ban means that I am prevented from going onto the campus of Indiana University, Bloomington, for 5 years. If I do go there and if I'm caught there, well, then I'm liable to receive felony charges, which, life ruining charges. So as for academia, I mean, they didn't seem to care about that. I've received no official notice from the university about how I'm supposed to proceed. But luckily, the people in my department are a lot more serious than the administration, and they've been very helpful in finding me accommodations as necessary and working through the things I need to work through. I'm okay, and the work continues.
Well, hold on, because I guess the mother in me is coming out now. Ariel Gold. I want to know, because particularly I will say, as an African American, as Black people who were not allowed to learn how to read. When we get past high school, when we get to college, that's a big deal. In particular, it's a big deal for everybody, but for Black folks, it resonates very differently in the American experience because it was illegal. You could be killed for learning how to read. So when you have a young Black man who's online to get a terminal degree, who has testified before the United Nations because he is so regarded internationally, you got to tell me a little bit more than this, young man. I want to know.
Well, it's very obvious that the university.
What does this mean? Can you finish your coursework? What is happening here?
So the coursework will be it'll be difficult. It'll be a struggle. There's obviously an attempt from the university to harm my education or threaten my education by proxy. If they certainly want me gone from the university, they don't want me to get an educational experience and progress and receive a PhD. But they couldn't kick me out of the university outright, because that would require due process. They'd have to have a good reason. They'd have to go through the necessary channels. But in this case, they're trying to harm me by virtue of the police. The police can just summarily write an order and suppress the educational opportunities of anyone they want without going through due process. Now, we can appeal, but of course, many people have appealed and they have received stays of their bans, but not me. I guess I'm one of 3 or 4 people who they decided don't deserve a stay and don't get to come back to campus by the end of the semester. And again, we're working on this. We are trying to navigate the appeals process and figure out what's going on. Why won't they respond? Am I sending it through the proper channels? But all of it's on record. And we'll see how this turns out. But I can firmly say now that this does not put any brakes on the organizing work, because that's what's important here. I might not be able to get an education. They might be definitely profiling me or targeting me or whatever. But again, what's important here is that we stand up and fight back for Palestine.
Chip Gibbons, what say you?
Well, Bryce, I just want to give you my solidarity and support. I follow you on Twitter, and I've read your tweets about what's happened to you, and yet still just hearing it, it's just so utterly shocking and so contemptible. And it is, if I'm understanding correctly, they don't have grounds to suspend or expel you, but they've made it impossible for you to get your education by giving you this ridiculous campus ban, and that is just so Kafkaesque and so disgusting that, again, you have my full solidarity here. I mean, Bryce is 100% right. If someone put a tent on a lawn for a different reason, you would not have snipers on the roof. We hear people defending these actions with these arguments that, well, colleges can impose viewpoint neutral, reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And, that is true, but there's nothing viewpoint neutral about these actions. The campus administrators are not afraid of tents. Mike Johnson is not talking about the National Guard because he's so adverse to public camping at Columbia. These actions, this hysteria, this panic, this repression, all of it is because these young people are speaking out for the people of Palestine. They're speaking out against the war. They're speaking out against our government's complicity in it. And they're speaking out against their own universities' complicity in it. And the young people across the country who are protesting this genocide, and that is absolutely what it is. I covered the South African hearings for Jacobin. I listened to their case. I listened to the Israelis' case. I read all the documents. 100% persuaded that the threshold for genocide has been met, and I don't say that lightly. It's a serious charge, and it has been met. These young people protesting genocide right now have more moral courage than our president does, and they have more moral courage than Mike Johnson does. They have more moral courage than Donald Trump does. They have more moral courage than RFK Jr. does on this issue. They have more moral courage than pretty much any of the so-called adults in the room, any of the so-called leaders in this country. And it is repugnant to me to see them met with snipers, with tear gas, with police batons. And it is such an incredibly dark moment in this country, because we know that a majority of Americans support a ceasefire. They do. Polling shows that. Majority of our government doesn't support a ceasefire. And I really think the aggressiveness of these responses, the disproportionate nature of this repression, is being fueled by this disconnect between the government and the people. There was a famous poem by Bertolt Brecht, the German playwright, about something the East German government had done. And he said in the poem, wouldn't it just, sarcastically, of course, wouldn't it make more sense for the government to dissolve the people and elect a new one? Of course, because the people can dissolve the government and, elect a new one. And he was mocking the government's response and said, oh, if only the government could dissolve its people and elect a new one. And that is exactly what this feels like when I listen to Mike Johnson and Joe Biden. I mean, they're supposed to be leaders in a democratic republic, in a constitutional republic. And the only response they have to the majority of Americans saying, we don't want to be in a part of a genocide, is snipers, is passing laws to make criticism of Israel anti-Semitic, talking about creating a new fast-track process to strip perfectly lawful 501c3s of their congressional status here in D.C. And I'm loath to say anything nice about the D.C. police, but George Washington University, where 9 colleges are staging an encampment, asked allegedly the police to come in and break it up, and D.C. said, no, we won't, because they feared a public relations disaster. As you know, Santita, we in D.C. are not a state. We don't have the same democratic rights as other Americans, and Congress has a lot of control over us. And when you look at who's in Congress, you should feel really bad for us. And now Congress is pressuring the mayor. They're going to have a hearing in the Oversight Committee next Wednesday, not on the unprecedented police violence across the country, not of the stripping of democratic rights of American citizens, not of the violations of the Leahy laws, but of why D.C., a local city, is not using their public police force to repress protesters. That's what the Congress is doing. And it is just such an incredible failure at every level of leadership in this country. And I am so grateful for people like you, Bryce, who are out on the campuses and showing us what actual moral leadership looks like.
It's stunning. I mean, Bryce, stay right there, because Ariel Gold, this is happening.
This is happening under a Democratic president.
Yes.
This is happening under a Democratic president who today said that order must prevail. And by order, he said clearly, it was clear that he meant law and order. A Democratic president who today said free speech ends when we don't like what you say, who said that nonviolent protesters, that because they're saying the word intifada or because they're wearing kufias or because they took a building, called them violent, who said that these are intolerable, who said today that students have the right, people have the right to an education, to walk safely through campus. Well, clearly not Palestinians. They don't have that right. Thank you, Joe Biden, because he makes sure that they don't have that right. They don't even have the right to live in Gaza. So this is happening under, and he, not for a moment did he condemn the grotesque violence taking place against students, nor did he acknowledge the violence that took place at UCLA from a disgusting mob of hooligans. Nope. Instead, he called the peaceful protesters violent and unacceptable. He said that free speech is just, talking nicely. And in fact, I've been learning from our people, from our pundits on TV, from the talking heads, and from Biden himself, and from many other Democrats that, according to them, the whole civil rights movement, they won that by just talking nicely. It was like just a really nice free speech type thing. They said nice things, and they calmly voiced some, we don't like the inequality. And then there was a little negotiation back and forth about disliking Jim Crow. And then poof, it was over. And we have so much respect for that happened then. But today we'll have law and order.
That is this is Chip, Bryce, and I'm going to bring on Josh Feinstein, of course, from Jewish Voice for Peace in Michigan, Jewish Voice for Peace Action. This is to watch, Bryce, to watch what's happening to you and so many of these young people. I mean, because when you're arrested, it goes on your record. If you apply for a job, if you apply for college or for a post-undergraduate degree, I mean, they ask you these questions. And in this politicized environment, what does that mean? I mean, so Bryce, you see what's happened to you. You see you said other students have been banned for a year. So where do you all go from here? Are they going to appeal? What are their rights? I mean, what?
Yeah, we're trying to work on the appeals process, but obviously the university doesn't want us there, and they can drag their feet as long as they want. The ACLU has contacted the university on my behalf and looked into the appeals process, but received a note earlier today that they still haven't received anything. So to that end, I mean, I keep saying that the work continues because I'm still showing up every day. I can't be on the campus, but I can be on city property. I can be on the sidewalk all day. I can be, around the area. I have a map about where the city property ends and university property begins. And, I get as close as I can without inviting, those felony charges I was talking about. But the entire goal, and no one thinks these charges are going to stick. They didn't seem to do any due process whatsoever. And it seems like a clear violation of our First Amendment rights, given the fact that the reason that the police were called was because the night before we launched the encampment, the university got together and changed the rules of what is allowed in that space. And they understood that we were going to do a protest for Palestine. They said that we can't have Palestine protests. We have to change the rules to prevent these students. And then we're going to send in an army, arrest a bunch of them, and then ensure that they have, arrest on their permanent record and intimidate the students into backing down. But of course, Their actions have only strengthened our organizing capacity. We've received an outpouring of support from all parts of the Bloomington and university community. And it clearly didn't stop us because they did another wave of arrests that picked me up. And even after that, our camp continued to grow. So if I leave you with nothing else, I want to leave you with a bit of optimism that even though they're trying to ruin these young people's lives, even though that they're using, every trick in the book to intimidate people into silence, the young people today are not deterred. They see what's going on in Gaza. They see what's being done with their money in their name by the president that claims to care about them. They see all of that, and they see it for what it is, an absolute farce. And they no longer want to play a part in it. They want to change the world. And I think they're well on their way to doing so.
Well, our thoughts and prayers are with you and our support. We're in solidarity with you, and we want to know how we can be supportive of you. Because I don't know if Indiana University has to reimburse you because they're not serving you. I mean, we need to know exactly what is what. As you fight for Gaza, we must also fight for you because we're fighting for every student, every person who might step out of line now, Bryce and Chip. You've always been in danger. I mean, Dr. King was hated by most Americans right up until he was killed. He was the most dangerous man in America. The president had turned his back on him because of his stance on the war, but no matter, he just went on and he did what he needed to do. And I'm glad that you're going on and doing what you need to do, but you do have support, and I hope you know that, Bryce.
No, and it means the world to me that I have this network of people and institutions who are willing to assist me in my fight and our fight for justice.
And we need to know about the other students because everybody, we need to make sure that everybody is able to finish school. This is cruel.
Absolutely. And, what's worse is that the ban took into effect some of the students who were banned. They live in university dorms. And so that night they had to find their friends to go and get their stuff and get out of their dorms. We had to organize emergency housing to make sure that they weren't sleeping on the street. They couldn't sleep in the encampment. They're banned from the university. They couldn't sleep in their dorms because they're banned from there. So we had to find community members to house people. But, it's moments like these where you do truly appreciate the community that people have been building, that is being built over decades and years. Because without them, we'd be nothing. Without them, it would have been a disaster. Without them, nothing is possible. But everything is possible if you're able to organize, connect with your community, and utilize the strength that we all know is lying in our hands.
Bryce Green, everybody. Fairness and accuracy in reporting, Indiana University grad student. He's been banned from the campus for 5 years. How will he complete his studies? Well, we're going to work that out. But Chip Gibbons, you tell me, when you hear snipers, helicopters, the troops, it just sounds, this is frightening. One false move, you would have had another Kent State and South Carolina State. I mean,
we're just 2 days away from the University of Kent State. I mean, that was May the 4th.
Yeah.
And I really think as we approach this anniversary, it's worth for people going back and looking at what people said in the run up to Kent State, during the protest, and after it at the time, and ask themselves, and this does not apply to anyone on this panel, but it does to the folks on CNN and the folks in the White House, are what people said at that time, which we all know to be wrong and repugnant, do I sound like that talking in this moment? And am I contributing to an environment in which another Kent State could happen? Because in the run-up to those National Guardsmen who were, I think, themselves only about 19, shooting and murdering 4 college students, there was all kinds of demonization of the protesters. There were all kinds of claims they were dangerous, they had weapons, they were going to do this and that. And you look at the way in which false stories spread about the protesters, which have been overwhelmingly peaceful. I'm sure someone somewhere of the 30-some colleges or plus that are having protests can find me an example of someone whose conduct was not all above board. But overwhelmingly peaceful. And yet what we hear in the media is that it's like 1930s Germany, not because the police are breaking up protests, but because people are protesting. I want to clarify that. I do think, I think that requires clarification that these protesters are violent. And we hear again and again false stories. There are so many news outlets that reported that a Jewish student at Yale was stabbed in the eye with a flag by a Palestinian protester. Turns out that didn't happen. She wasn't stabbed in the eye. She wasn't attacked because she was Jewish. Northwestern had 102 students arrested, shutting down a protest because they said someone yelled, "Kill the Jews." A horrible, abhorrent thing to yell. Who do you think it turned out yelled that? A pro-Israel protester holding an Israeli flag, mocking the pro-Palestinian protesters. There was a journalist, Jake Sherman.
Wait a minute, and they arrested everybody but him.
But not him. Yes. And I'm not saying he should have been arrested. I am a First Amendment absolutist, but the guy who did the thing that's causing you to arrest people gets away with it. And then, there was a tweet on Twitter. I'm not going to call it X. I refuse. Elon Musk, whatever. He can name it anything he wants. It's Twitter. It's Twitter. Elon Musk does not control me. Tweeted this picture of this abhorrent anti-Semitic sign being like, this was at the Columbia protesters. Now, anybody who has ever been to New York City immediately recognized that wasn't on a college campus. And multiple other journalists said, hey, what are you doing? That's not a Columbia student. That's not on Columbia. And it turns out that guy is a local anti-Semite who goes around to public events holding up absolutely despicable anti-Semitic signs. And this so-called journalist was trying to pass that off as a picture of a Columbia student. And it's like, oh, I just want to see people to see what type of anti-Semitism is in New York City. And like, fine, okay, that's a laudable goal, I suppose. But you literally said it was a Columbia protester, and it wasn't. So those are just 3 examples of falsehoods that have been circulated and spread with very little fact checking by the mainstream media. And then we go and we hear politicians repeat them while calling for the National Guard. We hear university administrators cite them while calling in the police. And it's a really very dangerous situation. And it does, to me, mimic the way in which the Kent State protesters were demonized in the run-up to Kent State. And I really think everyone on CNN and MSNBC and Fox should sit down this Saturday, learn the history of Kent State, and ask themselves, am I contributing to the type of environment that produced that massacre? And if so, is that who I want to be in history? Do I want to be the person who, in the midst of a genocide, told lies about 19-year-olds to give the police justification for going brutalizing them for engaging in speech? And maybe, I don't know what's in the conscience of these people at CNN and Fox. Maybe this is what they want to be doing on the anniversary of Kent State. But I would strongly ask them to rethink their actions.
Ariel, Josh, do you have a response? Yeah, I certainly do. I mean, because I'm wondering because it just seems like they're prompting that. Because some of this, I dare say, ratings, some of it. But a lot of it it's something sinister because of the way I'm looking at the smear. Look, coming out of the civil rights movement, Dr. King lived under smears. Mm-hmm. I grew up under smears. People they just lie on you. And then you got to deal with people who infiltrate your movement, people who are spying on you. Yeah. I mean, trust me, this is how I grew up. I get it. I mean, I'm looking at the news one day with just, 5 minutes before the 5 o'clock broadcast, and they're like, oh, so-and-so man sent to kill Reverend Jesse Jackson, more at 5. You're like, wait a minute. And he was the guy who used to drive us to school. And he used to drive my father around. He was part of the Red Squad, which was the same squad that killed Fred Hampton. It was devastating. So I'm just saying, I'm accustomed to all of that. And so when I'm looking at these demonstrations, I'm seeing that. When I'm seeing the police, the LAPD and the campus police stand down for 3.5 hours and let these people get brutalized I'm like, what are you all trying to prompt here? While
And
Netanyahu is calling, I mean, is speaking negatively about our American students, ours, and many of them are students from overseas, but they're at our American universities. I'm like, how dare you? What is this? Ariel, you were
well,
about to say,
and I'm watching today police officers point stun grenades threateningly at people's heads. And they call these non-lethal weapons, but you ask anybody in the West Bank, when you fire at somebody's head, and I've spent plenty of time in the West Bank and been fired at it, when it's a tear gas canister gun or stun grenade, when it hits somebody in the head, there have been many lives lost from that.
Mhm.
And I'm watching it this morning over and over. The police officers at UCLA pointing it at people's heads. And that is not non-lethal. That is a lethal weapon in that circumstance.
what is going on here? I mean, help me. I mean, Chip. I mean, before you go, you gotta help me, because we're watching this whole scale smearing of these people who are just out of high school. Let's be clear. They're meeting the real world, Josh, in a big way. They're just trying to go to school as they're learning things. You know what it's like when you're in school, and even if you, and for my listening audience, even if you didn't go to college, you know you're becoming an adult. You become somebody else at 18. I mean, you're finally grown and you think you know something, and you start learning things about the world. And oh, you know more than your parents and all your elders, because see, let me tell you, that's where they are. But the demonstrators I've met, they've all been very respectful, and they've done this. We had a Professor Angus Johnston on yesterday from studentactivism.net, and he helped us. We all kind of concluded, not kind of, we absolutely concluded that something else is happening with this demonstration. It's happening in love, in solidarity with people who we see are hurting. And whatever your background, we want it to stop. But, I mean, and that's not being acknowledged. We're only seeing Jewish kids who are fearful. And I hear you, Ariel. I hear you, Josh. But if you're fearful, I'm going to listen to that, because being fearful, I've had my own fears, and I don't want that to happen to anybody. But I also know, wait a minute, not when you're attacking the encampments. You can't have it both ways. You can't do that. Now, I mean, no, now you can't engage in Islamophobia. How about that? Now, wait. Now, I mean, the game has changed. And the playing field is getting evened, because now Americans want to know what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank. We didn't care about that before. Now we do. Now we're saying, wait, hold on. This isn't right. And I'm just trying to figure out where we go, because I've got nieces and nephews in college. I don't want them to have to deal with snipers. I mean, they killed, I think, 4 students at South Carolina State, if not more. I mean, there were 4 colleges in that year period, that 1.5 years, where, I mean, they just started, these children, they became target practice, and thank God they were able to vote after that, right? Because you lowered the voting age. But there's something going on here, and you got to help me. Help me, because we're watching this injustice with our eyes wide open. And I saw a study today that said that people who watch cable news are less likely to be empathetic toward the Palestinians. But if you watch network news, you are. I just want people to be empathetic with the truth, and just to stop this carnage. Is that too much to ask? Everybody? I mean, is it? I mean, are we supposed to be living in a police state? Snipers? Somebody help me. When Bryce told me, he said, no, there were snipers on the roof and helicopters, and, they called out the troops. For what? And then I've got Jonathan Greenblatt saying that he wants to apply FISA to everybody who's supporting, justice in that part of the world. I'm like, what is going on? So, I mean, Chip, if you would just give us a closing thought, because I mean, what are our rights here? I don't
Well,
know.
I think it's important to avoid an overly legalistic discussion here. I've seen some people sort of engage in this, well, this is a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction, or this is a that. Again, as I said earlier, the actions of these administrators are not neutral. It has always been a McCarthyite atmosphere if you speak out for Palestinian rights or speak out against Israel, even like a year after the Church Committee. And there was all these restrictions on the FBI. The FBI was engaged in tremendous surveillance of Palestinian students in this country. And if you look at all the big, quote unquote, war on terror prosecutions after 9/11, Sami El-Arian, Mohammed Salah from Chicago, Holy Land Foundation, it's all of Palestinians, people who are accused in many of the cases of giving humanitarian aid to Gaza because they claim the hospitals are all being run by Hamas. Where we heard that story before, right? And it has always existed, but it's gotten worse in the last 7 months. And I really think a huge part of the problem is that our government is out of step with the people. And this just isn't a crisis of free speech. This just isn't a crisis of of civil liberties. This is a crisis of our democracy. And it's a really dark moment, but there's also a lot of really inspiring things happen. And I don't, it's hard for me not to be all doom and gloom. I have a sign, no more massacres in Gaza, sitting somewhere in this apartment from 2014. That sign has never gone out of style. Unfortunately, I hope someday, it will be like a thing in a museum, like what was that about? But we are seeing people speak out and rise up against this. So there is some reason to be positive. And on that note, I do have to leave.
Sending you so much love. Will you have a new follower, Ariel?
Excellent. I think we followed each other on Twitter already, Ariel. Really? Anyways, I don't know. I'll talk to you later.
A fresh follow.
Wow.
No.
All right.
Anyway, great to be with you.
It's great to be with you too. Thank you so much.
Sending you so much love. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, Josh, we can hear you now.
Great. So many inspiring things were said on this call. And I think as we sit here and we try to see, what do we do? What do we do? Mm-hmm. We look at our sphere of, quote, influence, what we can do. We look at people like Bryce, who are very brave, and we figure out, how do we go? Just physically show up in the encampment, look at what supplies do they need, right? Make sure that we physically go to the encampment to support them with supplies and our presence. So that is immediate, because we still do have power. Yes, in terms of the establishment, they certainly have a lot of firepower, no pun intended or pun intended, but we still have this voice that's growing. And by just taking these simple actions of, yes, realizing the last 48 hours have been incredibly tough for everyone, between the students being just subjugated and abused. I must say, by the way, people usually use the term ironic in the wrong context. This is a right context of irony, that what's playing out in Gaza, there's a microcosm of it playing out on the college campuses right now. It's really, I don't want to use the word fascinating. I think that doesn't do justice to what's going on. But
it is an irony. It really is.
Yes, it is. You combine that with the HR 6090, what I'm dubbing the Anti-Palestinian Enablement Act, which I think just passed the House. That's not its name. Its name is something like Anti-Semitism Awareness, but I call it the Anti-Palestinian Enablement Act. So tough, quote, week for the cause, but at the end of the day, we look at how can we continue to help. So it's not just showing up at the encampments and looking at the list of what supplies they need. Have your listeners keep going to those ceasefire resolution meetings, keep going to those city council meetings. They're usually in every city, in every county. They usually happen. There's one every Monday and Tuesday night in a city or county. Go on force. You are allowed as a citizen to speak. Sometimes you get up to 3 minutes, up to 5 minutes. Make your voice heard that what's going on is wrong. Let those people on city council right here where we live know what's going on is wrong. And last but not least, there are tons of petitions that still go around. When you see those petitions, It's so nice. They've actually set it up so I can click a button, get it signed, and then it will have the congressperson's phone number. I will call up that congressperson's office and give them a quote, a piece of my mind, respectfully, forcefully saying what's happened. If we continue to do these on force, yes, they have the ability to abuse physically on their side, but we have the power of the people, and we just have to realize, how do we exercise that? And if there's anything I want your listeners to hear is, let's exercise the tools that we have, because we do have them. We are not hopeless. Those students like Bryce, they are inspiring us. Let's let that inspiration lead us to good action.
Well, because you see, Josh, Ariel, he's on the perimeter of the campus. Remember, when he didn't come on initially, Joshua, we were like, I said, well, I mused aloud. I said, well, I hope he's not been arrested because, Bryce is that guy.
Yep.
He's not going to stop. But these young people, they're not stopping. They're pushing. And they're pushing. It's
wonderful.
Of course, they're pushing for the ceasefire. Of course, they're pushing for an end to the injustice that they see just heaped upon the Palestinian people. But they're also pushing, Ariel and Josh, for a new world.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
When I've talked to these young people, when we spoke with Julia yesterday, when we spoke with Eden and Isabel and Bryce, this is not about money for them.
Nope.
They're willing to put their careers on the line. Trinice from FAMU, as she said, and she and Mar from University of Wisconsin, they're trying to figure out their educational options. They're like, wait, I've got a lot of rethinking to do. Not, I've got to pull back on this because I've got to make money. They're like, no. I'm connected to all of these people who are being killed over here. And now I want to understand how my government really works. And I don't want any institution with which I'm affiliated to be an investor in this. I mean, to me, they have seized upon something else. This is so much bigger.
Yes.
That I mean, even then, maybe we can imagine. Because sometimes you just get caught in the ways of the world. That you just you keep on. They're on something else, I guess. Yes. What do you think?
So, Ariel, your thoughts?
Yeah, what we thought was such a disconnected generation, or we have, chatted about that so many times, and this moral clarity.
Yeah.
Right? Moral clarity. And I was listening to some of them today, and they are so clear. This is an anti-racist movement. We will not take your false accusations of anti-Semitism. We don't welcome any forms of hatred or racism. And we are in this. We are in this for a better world. And they are steadfast in that. Mm-hmm. And that is a lesson for all of us to take. And it's a lesson that our elected officials, need to hear, because watching this horrific piece of legislation go through the House of Representatives.
Explain to the listening audience what went through.
It's a anti-Semitism bill, and it has teeth. There have been some other condemnations of anti-Semitism, so this one has teeth. And this one is chilling on free speech. It outlines, and Josh, you may be able to explain it better than me, but it outlines what can and cannot be said, and it appoints panels to judge whether schools are meeting these false definitions of anti-Semitism, because it is a flawed definition that equates criticism of Israel.
Panels and monitors.
And that affects school funding. And you know what it even affects? So it of course, it's not going to allow Palestinian voices and so on, but it also erases as well, and this is important to me, the history of Jewish diaspora.
How so?
Because the history of Jews in diaspora is a lot of anti-Zionist history. If we look at the Bund movement in Russia, if we look at the Jewish labor movement here, there's a lot of anti-Zionism in our history, and it forbids that. from teaching on college campuses as well. So it also erases our history as Jews, and it places us only in this new time of the Zionist movement, the movement of Zionism, which is, you know, in the span of our history, it is so new, right? And it is chilling, and it should worry everybody, whether or not you're part of the struggle for Palestinian liberation or not, because it sets a precedent as well, to police what we can say. We can no longer say intifada. We can't say from the river to the sea. The list goes on and on. And now we can't say anti-Zionism as well. That's banned too. That's anti-Semitic. And you know, I've been following these encampments, and I am yet to see any form of anti-Semitism that is systemic. That isn't some random fringe person on the sidelines. This is not what this movement is about. This movement is about liberation, and the attacks on it is, and you know what? Since it's about liberation, it's deeply threatening to the empire, and I, you know, that's where a lot of this repression comes from.
Dwight McGee on your show summed it up really well the other day. He said, the stakes are so high if you are pro-Palestinian and humanitarian, there's an existential threat to existence. If you are a Zionist, there is a perceived threat to existence. And therefore, the way to protect that is to tightly couple this notion of Zionism, which is, as you know, an apartheid notion, which is a racist notion, and make sure it's tightly coupled with the idea of Jewish identity, and therefore make the equation Zionism equals anti-Semitism, when the two could not be further from the truth. And this bill attempts to actually make that connection. And the bill is successful in actually, on the letter of the law, starting to make that connection. But we will be undeterred. You know, we're not happy about it. And it is chilling. Ariel is correct. It is chilling. But we take it, we see for what it is, and we figure out, okay, like everything else that's thrown at us in our movement, how do we work through it? You know, first we call it out for what it is, and then we move on to, okay, me personally, I want to say, and might not make people on the far left very happy, I was never a big fan of the term anti-Zionism, only because except for war, I don't like to be anti-anything. I am, yeah, so you're on the same page. I am a non-Zionist. I do not believe in Zionism. I think Zionism is, again, I know it's Ariel, you and I are on the same page here.
I hated that term.
Yeah, but I do not.
No, explain to those of us who are not Jewish. Help me.
It's framed in the negative. Like, I'm a Jew with Palestinian rights. And it also divides us. You know, I have family members who identify as Zionists, but they're grappling. They're grappling and they're moving, because it also, like, Zionism it's conflicting with their values, and they're trying to figure it out. And so when someone comes at them and says Zionism is terrible and you must be an anti-Zionist, they you know, shrink back a bit. And sometimes we, you know, need to frame it in the positive. When you come at them and you say, I'm for Palestinian rights, they say, oh yeah, that rings true for me.
I think that's spiritual law. When you frame things in the positive, that's what you get. You always, the Bible says life and death, the power of life and death is in the tongue.
Yes.
That's why, you know, and my father often cautions us, wait a minute, no, don't speak that. That's negative. You're going to get that. Don't be against something, be for something. He taught me you don't have enemies, you have opponents.
Yes.
So he said, and they change all the time, which is why he can know a Strom Thurmond and give him a hug.
Yeah.
Well, that's a. I mean, I'm very impressed with this.
Wow. Look. Roger Ailes was one of my mentors.
Wow.
And became. He'll always be dear to me. God rest his soul. We didn't agree on many things politically. We agreed on something socially, and that was fine. But we met as human beings first, and we liked each other as human beings first. And I try to start there with all people first, because even as you talk about the arc of your life and your path, Joshua, you might have looked at my father at one point and gone, I've seen it happen. Then you meet someone and go, you know what? And as you evolve, you say, wait, you know what? You end up becoming brothers and sisters. That
Fair
stuff
enough.
happens. And I have to leave space for everybody to evolve. Please, I don't agree with myself 10 years ago. Honest to God, I mean, there's some things that I've done that that's why I buy all these books on, growing spiritually and self-improvement, because you're always trying to tinker with yourself and like, whoa, because my thinking's not right here and I need to change it. And I'm consciously working on myself. So I appreciate your correction on that and your instruction on that.
Yes.
Because I think that's not a lesson for Jewish people. It's a lesson for all of us.
Yes. Yes.
Because I think that's what these young people are trying to show us. Because you can't bring this stereotypical bigoted garbage into their encampments. They don't want to hear it. The Palestinians don't want to hear you downing the Jewish students. The Jewish students don't want to hear you downing the Palestinians. No one wants you talking anti-Black talk. They don't want to hear any of that.
Yep.
There's someplace else. And so when I see them smeared, it is very troubling. It angers me. Yes, negative. It bothers me. It makes me.
It was okay.
Angry.
Okay. Well,
even when Ariel was saying,
yeah.
It does, because I'm like, you're not
okay.
telling the truth on them. That is not what they're not on that. They're not. So the last, 2 or 3 minutes I'm giving to you all, because I'm just trying to figure it all out. And it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. But Josh, I will say this about Bryce. He is, and these other students who have been suspended, some who are looking at expulsion, they're marching on.
Yes. And I think, to your point, we think about Bryce, and yesterday Julia, the day before that Eden and Isabel. We think about the bravery.
Denise and Mar.
Yes, and the bravery and courage. And at the end of the day, when you look at the Ariels and the Joshua Feinsteins, we are non-Zionists. And as non-Zionists, we have to continue to figure out how can we best support these people to make the movement grow and to make sure that they are able to move forward and that we hold hands and move forward with them. And that is possible, despite everything that's coming at us. Do you agree, Ariel? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. These are some times that define us, right? These are times that define us. And we take a principled position in unity with each other towards liberation. And you're right, Santita, we are all works in progress, right? And we are all in need of that self-reflection, and we all make those mistakes. And we are together striving for liberation. Mm-hmm. And we know what we're up against, because it's the same empire that our ancestors have been up against, right? It's the same empire that took us into war in Vietnam. It's the same empire that brought slavery, that colonized the Caribbean, and on and on and on. And we know what we're up against. Mm-hmm. And so we continue together to struggle for liberation.
Well, I tell you, that's really it, everybody. That's it. And we are one. I know some of you might not like to hear it, but I promise you before the Lord, we are one family made by one creator. We might have different religions, but those of us who are believers, we're of faith.
Yes.
So, just take your path. And if you're an agnostic or an atheist, take your path. But let's learn to love each other. It's just as, that's the commandment. Let's love each other. You don't have to like each other. But when you love each other, you're going to end up liking each other because you're going to understand each other. Yes. I say, well, okay. Did I sound Jewish? I don't know.
Ariel and I are rubbing off on you.
No, I'm just saying, this is, this is the Jacksonism too.
My puppy did that too.
Maybe I got it from Streisand, because I am like the biggest fan. No one can jump in front of me with that. Okay, I love her, but I'm just saying. I think we all come from the same spirit.
Yeah.
And one day we're going to be in sync. And so we're praying for our young people, and we're going to work with them.
Very inspiring.
And I'm so glad that they're remaining encouraged, and dare I say that they are keeping hope alive.
Yes.
That they are moving. The zeitgeist is moving us into the right world. And that's it, y'all. I don't have any more for you except for on Sunday, keep hope alive. You know, Ariel, you know I'm going to call you Josh. See,
All right, I'm there.
Okay.
I'm there.
All right. We'll be there.
yeah, because we have to talk about what we're gonna do to support these young people, because we've got to get them back in school, and we have to let the schools know that we're not playing with them, particularly the state-funded schools, but even the private schools, because they get public monies.
Yes.
You're going to educate our children. You're going to do that, and we're not going to have professors who are biased against them. That's over. It's a new day.
Yes.
That's right.
And everybody's going to be free. Israelis are going to feel secure, and Palestinians are going to get justice.
Yep.
That's the only way we're going to work this out.
Yep.
The only way. Love you all. Love you, Ariel. Love you, Josh. My brother from another mother and my sister from another mister. Ow, I'm Santita Jackson, AM 950 Radio. I love you.